Canadians are always dreaming up ways to ruin our lives. The metric system, for the love of John.
Captain Kirk of the USS Enterprise. Canadian.
Do not panic! I'm in complete control!
Welcome to Canada.
I'm your worst nightmare.
I don't know what you're talking about.
We got ways of making you pronounce the letter O.
What we have here is a brave and misguided group of Americans who've gone right into Canada and kicked some serious Canadian butt.
Our border. That thin line which guards the midsection of North America, that separates football and better Netflix from hockey and Ryan Gosling's hometown. The longest international boundary in the world, historically defended, barely policed. A fact so widely accepted that it served as the comedic setting in that movie, Canadian Bacon, which satirized rising tensions between we neighbors. Yeah, it's too bad there's a lot less to laugh about now. Sure, we're not as bad as the guns and drugs and illegal smugglers to the south of you, but boy, Prime Minister Trudeau's Syrian refugee plan sure has you worried. I mean, I don't blame you, especially with the whole ISIS bragging about smuggling covert gunmen into Western nations disguised as refugees thing. Yeah, that. It's no wonder your Senate's Homeland Security Committee is calling our ambassador and others to testify about our migrant fast-tracking and implications for your national security. Even if immigration minister over here referred to the hearings as, quote, political theater and chalked it up to a quote, a Tea Party operation. Yeah, well, we voting Canadians, we actually want answers too, just like you guys. So we want to make life a little easier for you Americans as you brood over these hearings. So we figured that we Canadians could provide you with a snapshot of what we do and don't know about our own refugee plan. All right, first things first, the questions we have, what we don't know, and sort of hope you can figure out for us. Yeah. We have no idea how many Syrian refugees are actually destined for our shores in total. Yeah, true story. When our new government was elected into power in October, they pledged to bring in 25,000. Now they're throwing around numbers as high as 35 and even 50,000 by year's end.
We will bring into this country 25,000 refugees, but that in the target date is by the end of February. Now that'll be a mix. So that's 25,000 refugees, partly private, partly government. Through the rest of 2016, we will bring in more refugees. I cannot tell you how many, but I would not be surprised if that number was large.
Yeah, so giant question mark around the number. But what about the people behind the number? The Canadian government is telling us, i.e. media and opposition politicians, virtually nada about who these people actually are and how they're picked. Like, are these people mostly Christians, persecuted Muslims, targets of Assad's regime? How are they being prioritized? It would seem like a pretty simple question, right? And yet they're keeping us totally in the dark. They also won't tell us what type of questions they're asking refugee applicants. Like, hey, how do you feel about them non-niqab wearing Jewish lesbians? Because in Canada, those types of people, well, they're free to exist and say not be stoned or thrown off roofs. So we don't know the grand total or who these people are or what they're being asked to get into our country, which shares a massive border with you guys. But our government also won't tell us if there are any health concerns being raised during the screening process. Questions like, hey, can you pee in this cup over here to make sure you're not carrying Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome into our country? And when it comes to questions about security concerns, it's kind of like a top priority. Yeah, no dice on that too. We have no idea if they're asking them questions like, hey, how do you actually feel about ISIS? Because apparently 13% of you sympathize with them. And that's sort of worrying when you consider Canada's background checks on refugees are just a touch less rigorous than the 18 to 24-month vettings done by your authorities before letting any Syrian set foot on American soil. All right, that brings us to what we do know. At the time of taping this show, shy of 16,000 Syrian migrants have already arrived in Canada simply since November. By the time you watch this, yeah, that number will likely be much higher, as the Canadian government has promised to resettle at least 25,000 Syrians by March 1. We're told we're favoring women, children, and families. So yeah, there are a couple of questions as to whether or not our government pays any attention to the evolution of terrorist threats, say like the female shooter in San Bernardino, who was married with a kid But I digress. At least 4 Canadian cities have already asked for a pause in the influx of refugees, as they're simply they're not equipped to handle them. For the record, I have been to 2 of those hotels housing refugees, and it ain't secure, it ain't pretty. Meanwhile, health agencies are warning of potential infectious disease outbreaks in said hotels, as they admittedly struggle to plan for the coming months. Oh, also what we know, our Auditor General, he says if someone wanted to exploit the gaps in Canada's border safety system for the sake of criminal activity, it wouldn't be difficult to do. Meantime, our Border Services Agency missed its target for, quote, timely removal of failed refugee claimants, according to the latest departmental performance report. So here's where we are. Basically, we have more refugees than we can handle already in our country, some of which might get very sick, others who might be exploiting our system for criminal activity, and we can't even deport them in a timely fashion. Pretty comforting, eh? On a wider note here, neither U.S. Border Patrol nor other federal law enforcement agencies have ever actually stopped an Islamist terrorist coming across your southern border with Mexico. Whereas on multiple occasions, federal agents have stopped terror suspects crossing in, you guessed it, from Canada, including the Millennium Bomber, who drove off a ferry from Canada onto Washington's Olympic Peninsula with a trunk full of explosives. And between foiled plans like via rail passenger plot or successful terrorist strikes like the one in Quebec, the other one in Ottawa in just 2014, each of which claimed the life of a Canadian soldier in uniform, I think it's pretty fair to say Canada is anything but off jihadi radar. And so, U.S. Senate, on behalf of Canada, we hope your hearing renders real answers from our government, because it's about time they answer to someone.